Hey guys, I'm Zach Steele,
Tyler Hobart.
and this will be this week's episode of Buy Low and Sell High. So let's get into it. Um, so starting here, a player I really think you should buy low on is Miles Sanders. He's missed a week, and I think he's still third in the NFL in rushing yards. So he's clearly talented, and he's doing that with a bad offensive line. But things can't really get worse for him. I know he's probably going to miss the
They
next
did.
2 weeks and then be on bye. So you're only trading for him if you're 4-2, 5-1. But if you
Yeah,
are, you're getting a top 10 fantasy asset, at least running back for the playoff stretch. And likely the Miles Sanders owner is really frustrated with him. He already missed a game early in the season, and now he's out for more. So you can probably get him pretty cheap.
I agree. I think a similar player with really high upside, like he's performed really well at this point, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. With him, he's just a great player on a great team. And you might find an owner that's a little worried about Bell for some reason, but I'm all in on getting Clyde. I think he's running back 13 so far this year. He's got a
Mm-hmm.
ton of carries. Hasn't had great success inside the 10-yard line, but you got to go for
That's
him.
got to turn. And I think people are overreacting to Bell. Bell's coming in there to
Yeah.
replace the other guys. So you're not going to see any more Darrell Williams or Darwin Thompson, but I don't think
So, yeah.
Clyde takes much of a hit snap wise.
hmm
So moving on here, I've got Cooper Kupp. If you watched that game on Sunday night, he was awful. I think he ended up with 3 catches for 11 yards on 9 targets, and he lost a ball in the lights or something, so he missed on a deep one. Dropped. He was just awful, but he's a good player. I still think he's the receiver to own on that team. I know him and Robert Woods are really just neck and neck, but I prefer Kupp. And anybody that watched that game particularly is going to be ready to dump him just because of how bad he looked. So I think he's someone you can buy low on this week.
I agree. So I have Tyler Boyd as a buy low. I think we might have had him buy low last week as well. And so he only had 5 catches this week. He has 9 in the last 2. No touchdowns, which is what I like because his
Mm-hmm.
points don't look very great, but he's still one of the great wide receivers and with a clear role in Cincy. So I think he's someone that's going to continue to get volume, and maybe you can trade a wide receiver that won't have as much volume like Juju or CD later and
Yeah.
try and get him.
So I think what we're saying here is we're not worried about AJ Green, even though he had a bit of a resurgence last week. It's still Boyd and then
No,
Higgins.
oh,
Higgins the third
yeah,
receiver there, and I don't think you'd
yeah,
worry about him.
no.
Another guy I've got here is Jonnu Smith. I actually just made a trade for Jonnu Smith about half an hour ago, so I'm at least practicing what I'm preaching here. But he's been a top 5 tight end throughout the season, and that's with a bye and a game that he left early because of an injury. I know he might miss this week with his ankle sprain, but it's definitely not serious. They're past the bye, so even if he misses this week, you're probably good with him the rest of the season. And
hmm
I think he's one of the few tight ends that stands out among the rest of them. I think it probably goes Kittle, Kelsey, in whichever order you want there, then Waller, and then Jonnu's 4. And I don't think there's much of an argument for that. Maybe Mark Andrews, but he's been meh. So I think you're getting a chance to really get a difference maker at tight end, and you're getting him at a low. So I would go get Jonnu Smith this week.
Yeah, I like him a lot. So I think Kareem Hunt had a pretty brutal last week, but I'd say that's more the Browns having a pretty
Yeah.
brutal week.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally think Kareem Hunt can be a top running back for you, a running back 1. And so I think he's not going to have a buy low opportunity the longer you wait. So if you can buy in on a disappointing last week, then I think you're going to reap a ton of rewards later.
Totally agree. Another guy I've got here is Chris Godwin. I know it's been a frustrating start to the season for Godwin owners, but you got to keep in mind it was his first game back this last week, so he certainly probably wasn't 100%. And on top of that, they didn't have to use him. They absolutely blew out the Packers. That defense looked good, which is a little concerning in terms of Godwin and Evans both getting the kind of volume they got last year. But I think something to keep in mind is Evans had 1 catch for 10 yards, and in every game Godwin has played in, Evans has been basically non-existent. So I think it's really safe to say that Godwin's the number 1 there, and he
He's
hasn't
still getting
really,
healthy.
yeah, and he hasn't flashed yet. So I think the Godwin owner's probably pretty frustrated about it, and you might be getting a top 10 fantasy receiver the rest of the season if you get him now.
hmm So I think with a similar story to Kareem Hunt, Aaron Jones just wound up in a terrible game for the Packers. And he's already had his bye, so I think he's an excellent buy low candidate to where if you can put together a nice package and you're already looking great, then he's going to be a wonderful running back for you the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm. Another guy I've got on here, I've had him on here pretty much every week all season, but Jonathan Taylor. Yeah. I'm telling you, he's an elite talent with an elite offensive line, and his snap percentage just keeps going up every week. This last week, I think something that was really promising was they got down really big early, and you still saw him instead of Hines, so he got a lot of involvement in the passing game. And now they're on bye this week, so if you're 4-2, 5-1, and the Taylor owners below 500, they probably need a win this week. And Jonathan Taylor's not going to do that for them because he's not playing, so he's a guy that you can probably get super low. And I'm telling you, he's an RB1 the rest of the season, so go get him before the owner realizes that.
So we have another Chief on here. I think Tyreek Hill is a great buy low candidate. Just poor outing for him personally, but I'm hardly worried about his role or that offense.
It's just a rainy game.
So I think if there's an owner that's maybe panicking a little, like go get him if you can, because he's fantastic wide receiver, and most people draft him to be so.
So moving on here, players I really think you should sell high on. Number one, I think here is pretty obvious, Justin Jefferson. I'm not saying he's not talented. In fact, I think he's very talented, but he's not. Most of his points, fantasy points this last week came in just complete garbage time. Kirk Cousins has looked awful. And he's still the number 2 option on that offense. Number 3, if you want to count Dalvin Cook, because they're clearly going to want to run the ball more than they've been doing. I just don't see his production being sustainable, and I think a lot of people think he's a wide receiver 1 or 2 the rest of the season, and I think that's his upside. So if you can sell him for that, do it.
Yeah, I think sell high. So again, I will stay saying Todd Gurley. So he's like running back 10 now.
Just get rid of him
this year. But he also is averaging less than 4 yards a carry and just isn't involved in their passing game. So if someone likes the name and needs a running back, I think you can go get a much better wide receiver, for example, or a running back with a little more talent and upside going into the end of the year. So still so high on Todd Gurley.
You can trade Todd Gurley for Jonathan Taylor. Do it.
Any day. And probably
right now.
Jonathan Taylor owners have like no idea.
Yeah. The other guy I've got on here is Ronald Jones. I know he's looked great the last couple of weeks, but there's never job security in a Tom Brady offense at running back. If he misses one block or fumbles, Tom Brady's going to want him on the sideline. And Leonard Fournette hasn't really been playing. He's been out the last couple of weeks with an ankle injury. So I think at least at some point, Ronald Jones' snaps are going to go down, and what he's been doing the last couple of weeks is his ceiling. And I think if people really think he's secured that workhorse role for the rest of the season, you should move him, because I don't think that's going to be the case going forward.
Interesting. I like him. I think he's a hold. Like, I don't think you need to move him, but I see the argument. Next, I got like Darrell Henderson. So here's a running back with just like no consistent role, in my opinion, and they're gonna be inconsistent week to week on his snap count and touches, and a really crowded backfield that I don't think Sean McVay wants to pick any one particular running back week to week. I think if you can get out of Darrell Henderson for a more established running back, I think you have to do it, because I don't really like Darrell Henderson going forward. I think this is his ceiling right now.
Yeah, I mean, he gets the most touches out of those running backs, but they really like Malcolm Brown in pass protection, and that's something that quarterbacks and coaches love. So, like, Malcolm Brown played half the snaps this last week, and I don't think that's going away. And Cam Akers hasn't even really been out there, so it's only going to get worse for Henderson.
And he could be, so.
Yeah. Another guy I've got on here is Will Fuller. I know he's been everything that fantasy owners drafted him to be. He's really stepped in as the number 1 receiver in Houston, but I don't think he's shown anything that he hasn't shown previously. He's always been an elite talent when he's healthy, but I think the key word there is when he's healthy. You can trade him right now as a wide receiver 1/2, and I would get out while he is healthy, because I'm just not betting on him playing 16 games. As sad as it is.
I agree. I like him though. Again.
Well, he's fun, but
yeah, he's very fun.
Yeah.
So I have James Robinson on here mainly because people, I think, are like there's potential that he's already had a ceiling, or at least you can trade his value toward the ceiling because he had a fantastic week that looked like he'd be a running back one for you, and ever since he's gotten that kind of workload with 25 carries, he's only given you 77 yards, no rushing touchdowns, just a fluky uh, passing touchdown. So I think if someone is willing to buy the hype that James Robinson can be a high-end RB2 or even RB1, you got to get rid of him.
I do disagree just because he's getting the volume and passing work. And
I don't think you need to move him, but like I think you can definitely
I think he's a top 15 running back the rest of the season.
Maybe.
You'd have to give me a lot for him, I think, but I would trade him for Sanders.
Can you package him? No for one. I know what you're saying. We're not doing this here.
Yeah, okay. All right, so another guy I've got on here is Deandre Swift. I know he looked great, but you have to keep in mind it was against the Jaguars. So that just for starters. And on top of that, Adrian Peterson still had 15 carries this last week. They used Kerryon Johnson in pass coverage or pass protection. It's just he doesn't have a clear-cut role. I really like his upside and I really like the talent, but I don't see him getting more than 15 touches the rest, on an average basis going into the season. So somebody's going to buy the hype. There are a lot of people that thought he was the most talented running back in this class, and maybe that's true, but he's just not going to get the volume. Adrian Peterson's a thing. Kerryon Johnson takes away snaps, and the Lions aren't going to be winning very many games, so I would move him if I can.
I agree. So I have Kenyon Drake on here because especially if you've held Kenyon Drake, and he finally looks like he exploded this last Monday. And if you can convince someone that he's worth even anywhere near what you drafted him at, I think you got to move on from him because I think last week's definitely going to be his best week for all the rest of the year. So I think if you were looking to get out of Kenyon Drake, now's the time.
So another guy I've got on here is Rob Gronkowski. It looks like on paper he had his breakout game this season. This last week, I think he had 6 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown, but there was nothing sexy about it. I get it. Tight end position doesn't necessarily need to be athletic to produce, but he's got the name and he's coming off a good week, so I think he's somebody you can move. I'd much rather own Hunter Henry going forward. I'd much rather own Jonnu Smith, even Gesicki maybe. He's not an elite talent anymore, and somebody might trade for him because he's got the name.
I agree. So I have DJ Morin here. He had a pretty good week, not anything crazy, but you drafted him to be crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's clearly the wide receiver 2 behind Robbie Anderson. And so therefore I think he's like a high-end wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2. So if you can flip him for someone much better in the wide receiver category, I think you have to do it, just because he hasn't really been able to run away with being the lead wideout that you want him to be in Carolina.
Totally agree. And real quick, we'll do something new. So we just got a comment on our last video asking, somebody has offered this guy Tyreek Hill for George Kittle. His backup tight end is Jonnu Smith. Would you make that trade? I'm going to say yes, because you've got Jonnu.
Yeah, because you have Jonnu, and I'm not necessarily,
I think it's fair, but you can afford to have trade Kittle with Jonnu as your backup.
Yeah, to where it's you don't need to go out of your way to own the tight end position.
Totally.
And
agree.
if you can get Tyreek Hill, that's amazing.
Yeah. Cool. So that'll be it for this week's video. If you want more videos like this, please be sure to like and click the bell. You'll get notifications every time we upload a video. We tend to do 3 a week. We did one yesterday on waivers, and we'll do one on Saturday just to run you through guys we'd like to start this week. Thanks.